Winston. It's a long time since we spoke last. Welcome to the Good Oil. And this is the first podcast, which will give David Fisher something to talk about.
Well, it's remarkable how something like this has piqued their curiosity on the basis of I don't know what. I mean, it's just happened not to be their business, and yet this is the New Zealand's #1 newspaper has got an article about today.
Yeah, they've got an article about an event that we're having to celebrate 20 years of me blogging / podcasting. What's it their business? David Fisher's I think he's got an obsession with me.
Well, I cannot understand it. I suppose I can, because they've forgotten that they're about, as Phil Collins saying, both sides of the story, telling both sides of the story, and they just write what they feel like nowadays. Sort of, as somebody once called it, fake news.
Yeah, I've noticed that now when you do your stand-ups on the tiles or anywhere there's media, you have somebody that's recording it.
That's right.
And then you get that out before they even put the story up. So we actually find out what the true story is.
Well, that's why I started doing it, because I couldn't trust what they were reporting on. They were trying to pick the eyes out of the thing and not, as I try to point out, sometimes showing their own deficiencies. Look, don't get me wrong. I think the Fourth Estate is critical in a democracy. But the Fourth Estate has changed its character now, and by necessity, because far too many in the traditional mainstream media are utterly biased, and the 82% result of the day that they are leftist in terms of the mainstream media was actually appalling.
But coming from you, I mean, you've very clearly set yourself as a centre politician. You're very firmly sitting on the centre. You want to do what's right for the country, but we need to be sensible about, stupid things like social spending that seems to be out of control.
Look, I've just seen in my career, and even I studied my student days, extremism politics takes us nowhere, basically. I look at the great era of, for example, Roosevelt in the United States coming out of the Depression, when he said, look, we won't always get it right, but we'll keep on trying. That was a statement of modesty. Whereas you got people of late talking about we're the podium of truth, we're this and that. And meanwhile, the country's staggering on decade after decade, instead of pursuing sound, workable policies where the worker and the boss are the same value. They've taken one side or the other, and that sort of extremism takes us nowhere.
Well, we're seeing that extremism in the shakedown of the board changes that are proposed at NZME, the owner of the Herald and News Talk ZB. We've got the journalists and the journalist union screaming that they want editorial independence. And they're upset because one guy put $25 million of his own money into the company. Now, I looked up the A2 union's accounts, and they've got about $22 million sitting in their members' bank account.
Yes.
But they don't seem to want to see. They want to have a say, but they don't want to pay for having that say. Whereas Jim Grennan, for example, is prepared to put his own money in so he can have a say.
Well, I don't know the intricacies as well as you do, but I know this, that their readership is declining. The market's getting potentially greater, then readership is slowing down. And about then, if you were in business, you'd start doing a serious analysis as to what's gone wrong.
Yeah,
but they don't.
It's not hard to see, because your favourite pollster, David Farrar, I think you called him the Rumpelstiltskin of politics. But he did an analysis of people's perceptions of news media. And every single major news media outlet that's there, with the sole exception of News Talk ZB, were skewed either left or hard left. And so what you've got is a whole bunch of people in the media that are competing with each other and ignoring the middle ground and everybody else.
Yeah, but there are some exceptions. For example, Radio Wātea, in good times or bad times, has had me on nearly every Thursday, or every second Thursday when I'm in the country. Now, that's the difference. They prefer to hear the other side of the story, whereas the people we're complaining about, their job is to gaslight people out that they don't like or they oppose, or views they oppose, but worse still, whose views might be in competition to them, which would mean that they'd have to strive to work harder. And that's not what they like doing.
Well, I mean, we saw that when the media in the stand up last week were attacking you for not using Benjamin Doyle's preferred pronouns.
Well, this was extraordinary, though. Here they were. They thought they'd get away with it because I called them out and said, "Why aren't you doing a job? You've got 52 posts have been pulled down, not because they're innocent, because they got things on them that needed to be studied by the authorities, and dare I say it, you. Had it been a conservative or middle-of-the-road politician, they'd be all in the headlines, front page, photographs and everything. In this case, a total blackout of choice by your bias. And they didn't like it. And for 24 hours, they thought they were going to win. And all of a sudden, the people that they thought they would enlist, the rainbow community, were so upset with the way they were being misused and liking to Doyle's behavior that they came out really hard too. And all of a sudden, the mainstream media decided to do a switch because now they've got a pitchfork up their backside from their own supporters.
I know. I mean, that's the thing. Like, Ben, not Ben Uffindell, Uffindell did something terrible when he was at school, and they still witch hunt him for it. But according to Chloe, what somebody did before they go and get into Parliament is all okay.
Oh, she came out and demonstrated her absolute unpreparedness for any leadership role. This is a person that stood to be the mayor of Auckland, the biggest city in Australasia in terms of its municipality. It's the biggest municipality in Australasia, and she puts her hands up and wants to be the mayor of it. Right there, you got to ask yourself, are you so darn arrogant that you thought you had the qualities to be of leadership in terms of knowing enough about the city to run it? And here she displayed the other day just how, unlike the image that she's managed to portray through a compliant media, she showed how utterly extremist and incompetent she is.
It raises a few questions, at least in my mind. You've been around a long time in politics. I think you were advising Noah when he was running for mayor of the Ark.
No, but I was marching the animals in 2x2.
But we've seen a drop-off in quality of candidates across all parties, haven't we?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that.
Of course you won't say that.
No, I can honestly say I look at the National Party backbench, and that's one of their best backbenches they've had for a long time. And I'm very confident in our backbench, or our bench, because they've been people of serious experience. So, no, I wouldn't say that. And I could tell you that there are members of the ACT Party who come with some far greater experience than others. So, if you're looking, though, at the Party Māori and the Greens, well, there's no identification or similarity between Fitzsimons McDonald and this current crowd.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at Rod McDonald and Jeanette Fitzsimons, they had integrity. I mean, they might have had batshit crazy, ideas about economies and things like that, but they actually had integrity and believed in something. Whereas this lot that's in the Green Party now seems to be pro-terrorism. And Chloe said the quiet bit out loud. They've got people in their caucus that are a subset of the rainbow community that happen to like kids. Because that's kind of what she said.
Well, then she damned the rainbow community because so many of them are so upset at being imaged that way. They're not pedophiles. They're not youthful philanthropists. They are actually got a different view, and I accept that. And it's long been the view that the government's got no business in the nation's bedrooms. But we're talking about things far more serious than that. But what was extraordinary about that was that she thought that with that argument she'd put together, that you don't understand, she was telling the media, you don't understand the language, it's innocent, it's just the way they talk, that this was all going to be smoothed over. No, it wasn't.
But in no part of society anywhere in the world is it okay to joke about having sex with children.
No.
It's just not funny.
Well, it's not. It's perverse in extreme. And all I asked was, come on, put those posts up and explain them. And they thought, as you saw this first interview with me, there they were all lined up. And I thought, you're not going to get away with this. I'm going to expose the fact that two of you are paid for by the taxpayer, and frankly, you're not doing your job properly.
Well, maybe we need to divest ourselves of Radio New Zealand and TVNZ.
Well, that has got a certain attraction to it. But you and I know that for a long time, And it's a great speech that a guy called Keith Holyoake made in the 1950s. Now, I wasn't in Parliament at the time, but he made a speech in the 1950s when Murdoch came over from Adelaide and tried to buy the Dominion. And he made a speech which I asked New Zealanders to read. He said, no, look, this is a developing country. He's got a developing culture emerging. It needs its own voice. And that's why he's defending an independent New Zealand newspaper. That's why I used to defend the New Zealand RNZ and TVNZ. But there comes a time when you say to yourself, this is a waste of defence because they are not the accurate, fair, balanced image of an emerging culture, which we all are.
We've seen that, though, over the last few years, particularly under the Ardern regime, where the media effectively became bought and paid for, shells of propaganda for the government.
Oh, but it was appalling. The moment Jacinda got chosen after Andrew Little stepped down, you had a thing called Jacinda Mania.
Yeah, mostly in the media.
Yeah, but Jacinda Mania was a lie because she came in with 37% of the vote. Shearer got sacked when he had 35 and before he even faced the election. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And they just get away with it. So there was no mania at all. And when it was all over, we saw how shallow it was in 2023 election.
I got the distinct feeling back then in 2017 that you had no choice but to go with Labour.
I had no choice when somebody walks into your room and the first thing he says from the National Party, his name's Bill English. She says she's got the numbers, but she hasn't. I'm not looking at Bill English now. I'm looking at some challenger or a spill-on, as they say in Australian politics. In the same way I shook Vulture's hand in 1996, only to find that they're out to roll Vulture. Now, that's deceit of the extreme. I'm not going through that again. For the last time, we barely survived that election as a consequence.
Yeah, I've been told by people on both sides of the negotiations in the three major, your party, Labour and National. And the National people, I've said some key people talk to me saying that Bill English didn't really show any sort of enthusiasm to negotiate. I know you don't like rewriting history or bad-mouthing people, but I think people deserve to know just why it is that, because I look at it and I think if John Key was there talking to you, everyone says the sticking point was the $3 billion provincial growth fund. I reckon John Key would have said, yeah, that's a good deal. We'll take that.
Well, where was it going? It was going to the National Party support base.
Yeah, rural New Zealand.
How could they want to turn that down? And the answer became very obvious, because they want to control things from the swamp or from Wellington, not realising that the provincial economies would soon, when COVID happened, be the only reason why we survived.
Yeah, because of those rural economies.
Yeah.
People who were actually ignoring all of the silly rules and regulations.
And trying to get on and make money
trying to get country. But because they were out of sight, out of mind, people in Auckland had the police breathing down their neck over almost anything. People in rural areas that I know were all just riding around on their motorbikes doing work.
Look, when COVID came in 2020, and we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't know what we were up against, and nobody did. It was excusable, but by 21, it was utterly inexcusable. Inexcusable. We had the second longest lockdown to a highly red type of leadership in Melbourne, Australia. That's it. And we are still paying the consequences for it.
Well, that's why the economy is in the toilet right now. It's because of that profligate spending on all sorts of silly projects.
Terrible. For which we've got many of them were consumption, you see. And with consumptive spending, you never get your money back. Investment in wealth creation, export creation, all these to-dos are like infrastructure. We're getting your money back 50, 60, 70 years later, but not with the kind of spending they were engaged in. And the media just slide past that massive increase in debt as though it's of no moment now.
Well, I can remember the Labour Party campaigning in 2017 against Bill English based on the increase in debt to fund the recovery of the Christchurch earthquake. And that was terrible spending. We can't do that and everything else. And then they went and spent 7 times more.
Well, it just got so bad. And I thought to myself, this is extraordinary. We go to the 2023 election, and out comes the latest fiscal update in September, It is, as I pointed out recently, a tissue of lies, because I can show 22 massive deceits or lack of declarations or decisions made after the document came out, which meant the document would not be accurate, or worse still, when you had fiscal cliffs because they're only funding for the next year or half or next 2 years. And all that should have been in the forecast, but it wasn't. And then when I made the complaint and attacked Labor for it, the media said, yeah, but Treasury did that work. Well, who was heading Treasury at the time? The Minister of Finance was.
Look, let's be fair, though. Grant Robertson wouldn't know the debits from the credits in a balance sheet, would he?
As it turned out, no. But he went off appropriately to Otago University that throws $100 million too. Maybe he's well qualified for that job.
He's paid more than the Prime Minister in that job.
Ah, well, extraordinary, isn't it? Extraordinary for a university that's in trouble that you pay that sort of salary.
It's totally incredible that they do that.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to go back a couple of weeks. I know it's a long time ago, but you made a State of the Nation speech and you called Labor liars and losers.
Which part do you want me to prove?
Go right ahead.
Well, they lied to me, as I found out. Hey Poor Poor was a report that we had to make back to the United Nations because a guy called John Key and a man called Finnison, against my advice, and then I'd stopped Helen Clark from signing up to it, signed up to it. So we have to respond to it. That's why the report was being done. But they never gave it to me, the Minister of Finance, when they saw it, and it was a perverse, total manipulation of what they were required to do. When they saw it, they thought, I won't give it to Winston Peters. They never produced it until the month after the election, until December. That's all the evidence I need. And yet they've started lying and saying, no, Winston, you knew, and some of these journalists want to say you knew. And Willie Jackson came into my aid, though, and he said, well, if we just, of course we didn't show it to Winston. If we'd have showed it to him, guess what he'd have done?
Yeah, would have stopped it.
And that right, stand in denial, there's the total rebuttal refutation by Willie Jackson, and they still want to push their narrative that I knew. And I can give you example after example after example. We went down to, say, T.Y. Point. We got a massive a meeting down there attacking the closure of T.Y. Point, based on, I might say, the decision that Muldoon made about costings in 1977. That was part of my speech. He rolled the costings up to made them sort of their enemy, public enemy number one, when what they were paying was more than fair under Holyoake's regime and everybody else's. Now, they also, by the way, are the finest aluminium makers in the world. There are thousands of jobs dependent, either directly or independently, of T.Y. Point. That's the point. And then I found out that Grant Robinson had said something, but all he'd offered them was $100 million to quit and leave. So down goes the T.Y. Point, a bit like the West Coast when Helen Clark said, here's $125 million to nap off, no more mining.
Yeah.
See the cost? The home of the Labour Party in 1916 is now being shut down by the very party that started them. Anti-worker, anti-everybody, pro-woke, so to speak. And what is dynamic in New Zealand politics at the moment that media and so many journalists can't get is there's a serious seminal shift in the voting base of New Zealand. Now, you probably look at me and think, what I mean by that? What I mean by that is who represents the workers anymore? By worker, I mean, it's the banker that goes and works 70 hours a week, the woman who goes to the medical thing and works 70 hours a week, or the guy on the pick and a shovel. We're all workers here.
Mm. All making something, all doing something.
And this is the campaign for the workers versus what I call the virtue-sitting bludgers, so to speak.
It's a good term for them, because we've seen that dynamic shift in the United States. And, I'm not quite as old as you, but I've been involved in politics all my life. You knew my dad. And, we've been involved in politics. And one thing I've noticed is that all around the world, the parties of the left, like the Democrats, Labor in Australia, they've abandoned the workers. They've left them to their own devices so that they could throw themselves at the feet of the globalist forces, where people who are workers are treated as a commodity rather than a valuable asset for society. And as a consequence, you're seeing people like Donald Trump, as blunt and as rude and abrasive as he is, he's a much better choice for a worker than the liberal elites of the Democrat Party.
Oh, people aren't observing things properly. The trouble with politics, the trouble with critique, so to speak, when you talk to people, instead of saying what is properly to be analyzed, they say what they think. Now, what they think is of no value to me. It's what the analysis is that's of value to me. So the moment you talk about America, they say, oh, I don't like Trump, and that's it. I'm afraid that's not it. They've got a right to put tariffs on product coming to their economy, just like we have, and which we used to have in the bad old days, so to speak. But what I'm seeing in America is a devastating attack on the Democratic Party base, and it's succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, I think the latest poll I saw last week was the Democrats down to support for the Democrats in Congress is down to 21%.
Yeah, it's staggering. Yeah, that's what everybody's missing. This is not by accident. This is a deliberate smashing attack on the Democrat Party base. Now, I'm foreign minister. I'm going to be independent. Now, when you say Australia, well, you've got to be careful because the Australian Labor Party has always been, particularly under Hawke and Keating, were very cautious to make sure they got business on side while they gave the worker a fair go. But they did the deal and they were successful. Remember, it's 1984. They've just got to power before Douglas and Longy got to power. We take a massive neoliberal revolution, and we're 41 years on, where's the value? They went down the path of incremental change, build and build and build on that. They grew 37% rate in real terms. Those are the facts. But unfortunately, I used to go around and talk to business people, and they'd just close it off. They'd close their eyes, close their ears, refusing to believe the facts.
Well, politics is all about facts. It's all about numbers. The latest poll came out from the Taxpayers Union Courier poll. And you've lived up in the preferred Prime Minister stakes. You're now at over 10%. And your party is...
No, I'm on 12.8, by the way.
It's over 10.
I don't give a hoot about polls.
Yeah, but you know the numbers, don't you?
Well, because those are accurate numbers, and I don't think they're right.
Yeah, he might be the Rumpelstiltskin of politics, but, David Farrer's usually not wrong with his numbers.
Look, in 2002, the election starts, we're on 1.8. 4 weeks later, we're on 10.8. Was Farrer right about that?
I didn't think he was doing it back then.
No, yes, he was. He was involved in the national program back then.
But here's the thing, right? That you raise an interesting point there. I've looked through the poll results for the last 30 years, and I can't find a single midterm point or poll where New Zealand First has been over 5%.
Yes, again.
And there may be one instance of that, but it was, a cursory look through it. But usually you're sitting under 5% and you build during the election campaign to get over that 5%. Well, you're well over that 5% now.
7 weeks out from the 2017 campaign, 8 to 7 weeks out from the 2017 campaign, Torben Morse came in to tell us that Labor had fallen to 20%, New Zealand First was on 19%, and within 3 days, the Labor Party dropped its bun and changed its leader. We were 90% then. That's what I was thinking when I saw that poll. I haven't got enough candidates. Good candidates. I panicked. It didn't work out the way because they changed the leader. But I knew I didn't have enough good candidates to justify that. And that's why we've spent so much time now getting ready.
The National Party has spent 30-odd years or more beating up Winston Peters. And I know because I was part of that machine, where it was whatever Winston says, we're going to do the opposite. And it was post-dirty politics, actually, where I suddenly realized that everything that I'd heard about Winston Peters and been told about Winston Peters was pretty much a lie. And I started paying a lot more attention to what you were saying and what you're about. And I realized that you haven't changed in your message in that time. And now, it's ironic. Here we are, a couple of days out from your 80th birthday, and you're in a really good position for the next election.
Well, we didn't believe that 2023 was the critical election. We had to cement it in 2026. And that's why when I was asked, are you going to stand in 2026? Even back then, I said, yes, I am. Because there's a two election result we had to succeed on. That's why we're working so hard as a team. But it's a funny thing, reality is, how shall I say it? I've seen people that I used to hate, I've came to like. Usually it results from a conversation where you realize, hang on, that's not too wrong. Or maybe I got the wrong answer. Frequently, though, you get the wrong impression about people because others malign them deliberately to give you the wrong impression.
I mean, I've heard stories forever about Winston Peters. He's never delivered anything, and usually those people are over 65, and I say, well, have you got a gold card in your wallet? Yes. Well, Winston delivered that.
Rates relief, hearing aids,
Yeah.
Free ferries, free buses, free trains. We took the rate of payment from what National take it to 60% back to not 65 where it was, but to 66% and wrote it into law. I mean, just the other day, there's a change in the income in April, which means I'll get $50 more per fortnight. Now, this in a difficult times, this is something. But they will say all those things. I mean, there's all the stuff in the Maori world. We could sit here all day talking about what we've done, but I learned from probably the good book that there's no sin like ingratitude. You're waiting around for thanks, forget about it, right?
Oh, exactly.
Many parents know that.
You're exactly right on that.
Right.
But I've also watched how the Labour Party and the National Party have used, the term in the United States is the deep state. The deep state's not that deep here. We know who all the people are, but they seem to have used the Serious Fraud Office in particular to attack you and New Zealand First at every opportunity, both parties.
Yeah, it was shocking. I mean, the Serious Fraud Office, it's April of 2020, and they say they're investigating New Zealand First, and they'll have it completed before the election. Now, no inquiry begins by saying it's got a final date in terms of detective work. So there's the first scam. And then when it came to what the allegations were, we were now suffering from that being against us all the time. And so we took them to court. We initiated the first court action before they got a chance to by saying, no, you'll answer the question right here, right now, or you'll remove any slight or any defamation or any charge from New Zealand First. So we get to the court, right on the edge of it, and they cave in and say, we're not investigating any member of the New Zealand First parliamentary party. Just like that. That's a massive victory because they were after me, right? As soon as that was over, it didn't matter. We lost the election and they're off to court. They lost.
And they lost at the appeal as well.
And then they appealed that and they lost that. That's $4.2 to $4.5 million, just like that. It cost us a lot of money and me a lot personally. And when I put my press statement out on the night of our victory, the third time, not one media outlet would print one word I said. And that's why I'm motivated. Big time. I'm not going to let these type of people triumph in our society.
It's incredible when you look at that, and particularly when you know the two people that they charged. They're the nicest people I've ever met in politics, and that's saying something, right?
Because they had no grounds to charge them. That's the point.
Absolutely not.
And so they almost got their professional careers ruined and damaged and what have you, trying to survive. We're trying to find money to help them along and all that sort of stuff. And here these people pay for the taxpayer, beginning with that, what I called her, that dingo from Tasmania, who was heading the Serious Fraud Office. She's an absolute nincompoop, useless as anything. She got down the road. They've had 3 since then, or 2 since then, And frankly, that office should be disbanded, in my view.
Well, there's a number of things that should be disbanded. We've got the police empire building with their firearms safety control. And ask anybody who's involved in the firearms industry or collectors or anything like that, it's an unmitigated disaster. But the police are just plowing on and repeating the same rubbish excuses over and over and over and over again about a problem that actually doesn't exist. And but we've spent $230 million on that. You look at the Serious Fraud Office, another example of empire building. Whatever we're spending on that, it's an incredible amount of money.
But on the police, look, on the police, I get your idea and I get what you're saying, but you're going to have to build a system that the people can have confidence in. I do not think the police is the right place to build it. I've always said that. It should be separate from the police.
Absolutely, it should be separate from the police, because the police are the shepherds, the guardians, and they're the people that prosecute you as well. But when any interaction with them, and I've had many interactions with the Firearms Safety Authority, the first premise of them engaging with you is they treat you like a criminal from the get-go. I mean, I had this woman call me from the Firearms Safety Authority, and they ring you up. It's on a hidden number, so you don't know what number it is. Then they say, "Are you Cameron Slater?" So, "Well, you rang me." They say, "Well, you need to verify who you are." I said, "Well, I need to verify who you are." And then there's this Mexican standoff. I said to them, if you're a criminal and you're wanting to find out where my guns are, you'd ring up and pretend to be from the Firearms Safety Authority, wouldn't you? Because everyone supposedly trusts them. Well, they don't. And then the next thing is, well, it's very important we identify who you are, because you've got an illegal firearm. It was an accusation, straight out. And I just laughed. And I said...
she just made that, she made that allegation.
Yeah. Made the allegation straight off. So all of a sudden, I'm now a suspect, right? And so I said, "Oh, well..."
Did you say, "Look, I'm going to find out your name, I'm going to get you fired"?
I always ask with their QID number. But I said to them, "Okay, so I've got an illegal firearm. This is news to me. Why don't you tell me what it is?" Now, she said that I've got a fully automatic Ruger 1022. So it's the 19th most popular rifle in the world. Over 9 million versions have been made of it, right? It's the most popular 22 sold in New Zealand, and she's accusing me of having a 22 rifle, a bunny rifle, and it's fully automatic. Well, they've never made a fully automatic rifle. So I said to her, "Are you new? Are you new on the job? Have you been put up to this? Here you go. You're new. Go and ring this guy and wind them up." I said, "Because it's stupid."
Well, she probably is new and probably doesn't know enough about armaments.
But that's what the police...
But don't blame her. It's not her fault.
It's not her fault.
She's not been prepared probably for the job.
Correct. But they don't engage with this. Yeah. But these are the things that are happening in all of these government departments, where you've got jumped up clipboard carrying people who have a sense of power and like to exert it.
Yeah, but I'm really after getting the guns off the criminals, the guns off the gangs, and doing the utmost we can to do that. And here we are, 5 years on, still haven't got the register sorted out. And we need to, in a way that everybody's happy. Now, that's not impossible to do. But if we don't stick with the policy, which was do this register separate from the police, that was the compromise that failed. It'll go on failing.
It should be in Department of Internal Affairs. They handle passports, and we don't hear of any data leaks with Internal Affairs, do we?
Well, hang on. Internal Affairs doesn't really inspire me with confidence either. Well, seriously. I mean, I'm not knocking them, but we've got to pick up our act everywhere.
Well, the way I saw it between 2017 and 2023 was that we had a bunch of nincompoops as ministers, the exception being obviously New Zealand First ministers, but we had a bunch of nincompoops as ministers who were told not to do anything, to rubber stamp what their officials were telling them, which is why we saw, the likes of Aisha Verrill rubber stamping ludicrous anti-vaping laws that have exposed us to massive litigation as a result, which they've now quietly, the Ministry of Health have now quietly withdrawn all that advice.
They've caved in, yes.
Yeah.
They've caved in, and here they got the darn media putting her arguments. She had clearly, and also she had a relation in the business, remember? and advising us without telling us.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But really, look, you say that. No, David Parker's got some serious brains here. He's a capable guy. Stuart Nash is a very capable guy. Stuart Nash got fired for asking this question. You are going to appeal it, aren't you? Everybody was asking the question. He shouldn't have had to ask.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the frustrating thing.
Now, you've very clearly put a stake in the ground that you're going to war on woke. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, they've given these marvelous descriptions on woke. They're saying woke arose from the movement that we look towards the rights of people and the unfairness with which people are being treated, and it led to the American Civil Rights Movement. That's what they said. And I'm looking at this and thinking, I've never seen so much bull dust in all my life. No, woke these days does not mean that. Woke means I've just got an education recently, or I had some inspiration recently, and no matter what you think, I know more than you do.
And I've got lived experience.
And I've got lived experience. In fact, I've been around for 5 minutes, neither here nor there. We had a ginger nut case at our bar, at our conference. Did you see that? In Christchurch, he looked like a schoolboy, and he's jumping up and shouting out, and I watched felt like that. And another time, I wish he was on the rugby paddock, I hit him as hard as I possibly could. But you're really restrained. But look, here's the difference. They don't know the, how shall I say, the anomaly they're talking about. The American Civil Rights Movement, I watched very, very carefully, and it had this feature. They sought to bust down the doors to the best white institutions to be part of it, not to start separate, through government, through tier, through justice systems. No, the American blacks wanted access to the best white systems that the government and the country had, and they happened to be occupied by whites, and they gained entry to them, and ended up the black president and the black vice president in person, in a way, called Kamala Harris. That's what the American Civil Rights Movement is about. Yet here, we shout racism, we want separate institutions, as though you could trust the separate institutions to be nearly as competent as the institution that the country of 5.5 million people can create. See how ridiculous this sounds?
Does that, a lot of your vehemence about this come from the way that the Labour Party deceptively and dishonestly gaslit New Zealand while quietly empowering a separatist agenda?
Oh, yes, utterly. When I looked at how deep they had done it and how far it had gone down in terms of behind-the-scenes work without disclosure, I found it absolutely repulsive. Just repulsive. Because no one would have heard of Jacinda Ardern or the sausage eater, Hipkins, if it wasn't for the choice we made. And we get all the blame for it. You see what happens? She could never survive in opposition because she was never good at it. She couldn't lay a finger on Paula Bennett when she was her opponent. Now she's given the chance of a lifetime. You don't do that to people. And that's the reason why Shane Jones and I, we all have the same view. The way they just behind our backs did that.
Liars and losers.
Well, that's what I call them that, yes. And they can deny it if they like. But, don't just accuse me of saying that. The first thing Hipkins did when he became the leader after Ardern was he had a bonfire of the insanities. Remember?
Yeah.
He burned all their policies. And then he came out and said, well, we had so many protests where we hadn't done the numbers properly. We should have done more work on it. What does that represent?
It's like KiwiBuild, isn't it? They said they were going to build 100,000 homes in 10 years.
Colossal.
They didn't even build more than 3,000.
No. At the time, and when they went, there was about, they didn't build 3,000. That's a different project. I think they never got past 385. We're going to have a cycleway over the Auckland Harbour Bridge. $54 million. Can you please tell me where that money would have gone when you didn't do the project?
And then we get Michael Wood, who was the minister in charge of that, now lecturing the board of NZME about how a company should be run when he couldn't even build a bike bridge over the harbour.
Well, light rail. That was blowing out.
Well, Jacinda said light rail to the airport by 2024, didn't she?
That's right.
Or 2022, I think it was.
It started out, they're going to build light rail under a process where they advertise, you can tender if you want to. And the Auditor General said, you can't go that process. That process is illegal. And it blew out from 1.8 billion to 14, 16, 20, and we don't know where it went to. And then, of course, in the last campaign, well, this is the extraordinary thing. I remember a former Labour Party way back when, But in the last election, they came up and farmers, guess how many tunnels? 3.
Yeah.
2 under the harbour versus one going North Shore. Cost business case, nothing.
Well, it's like when Helen Clark was doing improving the motorway to the airport, and she made them dig it underground in her electric because she didn't want it to be above ground. She said over my dead body, and I think at the time I wrote, that's a fair deal.
Well, it was a good idea too.
Yeah.
It was a good idea.
Yeah.
We all agree now, don't we?
Yeah.
But our problem is, as I said, our infrastructure is a cost-plus infrastructure regime, and it has to be changed. You take, the Puhoi to Warkworth.
How long's that taken?
Well, it took all that extra time, it got all the extra additives to it, additions to it that are not required, and on the basis of that, to go four-lane highway to Whangarei is going to be another 89 years. See, we're paralysed here unless we change as a country.
Well,
and it's not really party politics now, it's just plain common sense.
See, I look at an infrastructure project. It started when I moved to Whangaparoa in the 2014 election, and it was finally finished in 2023. By 9 years to build 3.5 kilometres of motorway, and all it did is it succeeded in moving the tailback from Otiha to Constellation. So they moved the tailback 3.5 kilometres closer to the city and disrupted everyone for 9 years doing it.
It was it's colossal, but we're in a critical stage here. We're a few weeks away, very, very close to finalising the budget because they need, again, here's a classic, they need 5 weeks' notice to publish it. Can you imagine this? There's a war on and we're going to hang on, we'll have to wait 5 years before we get the instructions ready and hand them out. It's a phenomenon, but anyway, that's where we are at. But New Zealand's in a very interesting circumstance now because the world is actually contrary to what people think. There's a lot of money out in the world looking for a place to go or a place to come. And we could be the beneficiary of it. But what do I answer the question? Why would I come to New Zealand?
Oh, why indeed? When you've got a bunch of people like Te Pāti Maori that are saying, it doesn't matter what deals you do, if we don't agree with it, well, we're just going to trash it. And of course, there'll be plenty of taniwha found there.
Yeah, but let me tell you this, our job is to, and we're doing it, we're trashing the Maori Party every day. Make no bones about it.
It's not hard, is it? I mean, they're a soft target.
No. Look, it's not difficult to have a duel of wits with an unarmed opponent.
Exactly. But that's the problem, isn't it, though, for the Labour Party? They're going to go into an election that they're already slagging you off, right? So they're kind of making it so it's almost impossible for you to even contemplate talking with them. And they're sitting there watching a Green Party implode under a terrible scandal that they don't seem to be prepared to deal with. And the Maori Party, which day by day are becoming increasingly outrageous in their demands and their behaviour, thumbing their nose at the very institutions that pay them, refusing to go to the Privileges Committee.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, for the Labour Party, it's a nightmare because, we all know that in elections, the decision is made when there's an alternative government in waiting or appears like an alternative government in waiting. And one look over there and it's a nightmare.
I just don't understand it. I think yesterday they wrote to the Governor-General asking the Governor-General not to sign into law or consent or add the royal assent to the changes that Karen Shaw has put through on around children and young persons. And they're saying, no, we want you, the Governor-General, the representative of the King who we say has part of a family that's committed genocide against Maori. We want you right now to stop this law, which we don't agree with. And at the same time, they're refusing to go to the Privileges Committee, which the Governor-General effectively oversees as the head of state, and refusing to do that. The address standards in Parliament have been lowered, and I actually blame various speakers for allowing those standards to drop.
Yes, it is terrible. The Speaker, people don't like to be not liked. as big guy, I think, should have said, no, this is the plan. You're going to come up, you're going to wear this standard dress. This is important. This is the highest court in the country, and we're going to show respect for it. As a guy called Stephen Mahari, the former Labour minister from Palmerston North, wrote a very good article for the Herald some months ago, or years ago, or not very long ago, but he said, look, there's got to maintain the standards, and letting these standards down reduces all the other standards. And he's utterly right. I sent it off to all my colleagues and said, pay attention, this is not from us, but he's utterly right. So we're going to have to do that. Well, that's for the Governor General, running the Governor General. These people are so ignorant. There's only 2 times in the recent history of the Commonwealth where the Governor General's had powers, in 1925 in Canada, and the Gough Whitlam tip over in 1975 Australia.
Yeah.
You know.
So, I mean, the Governor General, incidentally, who's a Maori,
Yes.
is being asked to stop a bill that, and their opposition to the bill is not based on any evidence. It's not based on anything other than feels. It's this woke thing again, where feels matter more than facts.
Well, you know, when you say a thing like that, if she was to do that, it's a bit like the 1975 circumstance in Australia. Gough Whitlam's mistake was he should have got to the Queen before the governor made his decision, and he'd have been a goner. And the same thing applies today. That's where the power lies. It still lies with Parliament.
You saw, I don't know if you saw, but last week there was a report issued that said, we've got a problem in New Zealand. We don't have mechanisms to remove leaders that are impaired or drunk or insane or anything like that. And I'm sitting there reading it and thinking, here we go. Here's a bunch of academics who haven't poked their head out of their desks and don't realize the constitutional norms that we have in New Zealand, that if a leader is so bad, that his caucus will rinse him in a heartbeat, in a New York minute.
Yes, well, so you can't do that to the American president because he's in for 4 years.
Yeah.
Our guy's in at the pleasure of the caucus.
Exactly, at the pleasure of the caucus.
Our man and woman's in at the pleasure of the caucus. You're quite right. I read that and I thought, are they trying to point somebody in Parliament saying that some of us are losing our marbles or what? Well, I tell you what, if you want that evidence, I was going to win that argument.
Well, I don't know about you, Winston, but I reckon you're in the best form that you have been in a number of years, and you're just about 80, you know?
Well, why does everyone think that's marvelous? Let me tell you, a guy this week broke the record for the filibuster. He broke Strom Thurmond's record. And Strom's broke for 26 hours or something like that. And Sky Butler broke it. Well, I met Strom in 1988, but he went on to be in the Senate when he was 100. Yeah. And Mahathir, my friend in Malaysia, Prime Minister of Malaysia, he's the Prime Minister for 21 years. He starts to make a comeback at 93 years of age. He wins, and he's still giving his party advice, and he's almost 100. Now, Warren Buffett has got all these people lining up to hear his advice. It's, I mean, what I really say to people, stop being ageistic. You should be grateful for the luck of being old. Everybody wants to grow old in time. And I feel, so fortunate against so many people I knew in my youth who never didn't make it past 30, 40 or 50.
But you've been around a long time. Everybody knows that. But
yeah, well, sooner or later they're going to say that about you, yes.
Eventually, it's like they're saying about me, I've been doing this for 20 years, but I've been doing it before that, because I've just been brought up in a political family. There's a couple of politicians in recent memory that I admire. One of those is Helen Clark. I don't like her politics. I don't like how since then she's turned into a curmudgeonly old bag that complains about everything and her worldview. But when she was in charge of that Labour Party, she stared down a coup. When she was in single-digit preferred prime minister, she stared down a coup with Michael Cohen and told him to go back to his room. And she managed that caucus and government particularly well, and I admire that in somebody.
Well, the vision, you use a certain description. I wouldn't agree with it other than to say about this. She had done the hard yards. She knew how tough it was. And she had enormous practical common sense of what the reality was against dreaming. And in the end, she got some good people around her, like Heather Simpson.
Mike Monroe?
Mike's just a Labour Party
Yeah, but he stood up to her. I know that for a fact.
Well, he might have stood up to it, but Helen Clark had the experience to realize that it's always going to be hard work. She was never going to have endowed upon her the kind of things that they will say about other women. She just had to do all the hard yards. And in the time I worked with her, she kept her word implicitly. I can't ask any more people than that, and I've depended her. And she's the only person I've ever, and when the person was writing about her, a story about her, she's the only person I would have agreed to be interviewed about. If they were to come to see me about some other party leaders, I'd never agree at all. But in her case, I thought she justified my making the effort to say that I was grateful that she kept her word.
That's a big thing with you, people keeping their word.
Well, it is a big thing, you know. And in fact, it should be. I'm actually stunned how much in the Scandinavian world, the lawyers still do things on a handshake, not in writing. Some businessmen do things on a handshake, not in writing. That bespeaks a society where very essentially good elements are alive.
Yeah.
Would you do it in New Zealand? You wouldn't handshake anybody now.
No, some politicians, you count your fingers after you've shaken hands just to ensure that they haven't stolen any or the rings off it.
What do they say? Shake your hand before the election and your confidence afterwards. Something like that, yes.
Yeah. So what's one world politician that you take great stock in, that you respect what they achieved, what they did, and you can see that the things that they've done has made the world a better place?
I'll just take our country. I think Seddon must have been a brilliant leader because it was difficult times. Travel was very hard. The country was just emerging, and he had to give it shape. And then I think Peter Fraser was a seriously very talented prime minister who gave it his all and died a month after he ceased to be the prime minister. And I also was a great admirer of Holyoake, because at the time I saw sort of what you call the Eastern Seaboard United States media, how they sort of scoff at the Midwest, scoff at the Texans, scoff at California. Well, we've had that breed in Auckland and in Wellington. And so the scoffing at Keith Holyoake because he left school early and all those sort of things. Now, he was a top-class operator. But those three, in my view, the standout ones in New Zealand. I've studied very carefully a man called Menzies in Australia. And I think Menzies, Bob Hawke, and Howard are the sort of premier ones in the last 60 years in Australia. Just been unbelievably good prime minister, so to speak. And as I say, not necessarily from the same side of politics.
No.
That's the point.
Politics has become more polarized. I've never seen it more polarized than it is now.
It is. It's funny you say it's polarized, yet the vote shifts far more than it used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's polarized. I think it appears to be polarized because that's the way the media and certain political leaders like to have it. And we know the media are mostly left. We see the negative coverage that you attract. You know, even when you're saying great things about, how you're going to expand industry and get back to our basics of what we've got amazing resources in New Zealand, and it would be sacrilege to keep them in the ground or whatever. And you get attacked for it because they've got this woke world view that's anti-mining, that's pro-climate change, and all of those things. And you're coming out and confronting them with that, in fact, effectively slapping them in the face, like with the Paris Accord.
Well, can't they make the connection between all the things they want requires something called money? How do you get money? Well, you
sell the things you've got.
Well, and if you're going to start stealing it off your own family, that's possible. If you're not going to get more money inside the household, you're going to get outside the door or get outside the country and make more money. And we're not making, they don't seem to make the link. This results in you having a social welfare policy, a health policy, an education policy, a first world leading like the Scandinavian policy. The Scandinavians do all this. The Scandinavians are notorious for being green, aren't they? They believe implicitly in extraction. This bunch here, there's a word for it, I can't say it's a medical word, but they are
retarded.
Kindest way is they're double-minded.
Yeah.
They're sort of theoretically schizophrenic, so to speak.
Yeah.
They just don't get what is required. And funny enough, they'll only get it if some Labour person came out of left field and said, we're going to have to go mining. Why? Because 96% of the room I'm sitting in and everything I'm doing has got extraction around it. That's the world we're in. And you can't build a new green economy without extraction. Where are you going to get your batteries from?
Well, that's the thing with the Scandinavians. They've got, North Sea oil and all of those sorts of things. They're extracting that. You can be as green as you like, and you've got heaps of money coming in. But if you don't have any money coming in, green politics is a pathway to poverty, the way I see it.
Yeah, but look, I just read Helen Clark years ago to start an embassy in Scandinavia. And she said, why? I said, well, I'll tell you why. There are 5 or 6 economies first rate successful. Iceland, all those countries are successful. The second thing, if you're flying over that, you don't see a river until you're over the top of the river or a creek or a stream because it's got tree belts down both sides. I said, all the things that you imagine you want, they're doing. Maybe we can learn from them. How about it? She said, well, that's the case, yes. You see what she's different to others? On that basis, she said, okay, fair enough. So we did. And we'll do much more work with them. We start doing more work with them now because of that. But I wanted my country, to learn from another country who we used to take refugees back in the late 40s because they were dirt poor.
And now they're
not. What's wrong with us? We were top of the world then. Therefore, now where are we? Well, we got to get it, to use our colloquialism, our mojo back.
The world's gasping with Donald Trump's tariffs. And I can't work out some of the calculations, but it is what it is, right? He's decided that the United States is no longer going to subsidize Europe. It's no longer going to subsidize countries that it considers its enemies, like China. China is an enemy of the United States, not necessarily militarily, because they can't project power yet, but they can economically. And it looks like Trump is doing what the World Trade Organization has singularly failed to do in 30 or 40 years. He's forcing people to contemplate and analyze their tariff policies.
It's actually amazing. See, you just raised this subject, and unfortunately, when this goes out on air, people are going to analyze what they think rather than what you and I are trying to say. So let's get it right. The fact is, does America have a right to put tariffs on products coming to this country?
Well, they have as much right to put tariffs on their products as we do on ours, and we do.
Well, that's it. And so the world is shocked. All of Europe is shocked at the moment because they did something that they're allowed to do, could have done for the last 30 years, but haven't been doing the last 50, 60 years. And then you got these theorists with these magnificent ideas what it all means. And personally, I think you're talking balderdash. This is going to work for America, and very quickly, because the reality is, it is as true as I speak. They're all relocating to cheaper economies to export to what economy? To export to America. America's rust belt and dust belt is created by lack of vision going forward. Now, I don't want this to be any more than my comment as a New Zealand First Leader, but I can see this working, and dramatically.
Well, I mean, I can see it working too. I mean, everybody, looks at what Donald Trump says and they take him literally and they don't take him seriously. Whereas people who know Donald Trump never take him literally, but they sure as hell take him seriously.
Yeah, well, when he said drain the swamp, that's Washington, it had 42,000 lobbyists.
No, it's a lot of people who don't want the swamp to be drained, right?
Well, but then you got a problem, haven't you?
Yeah.
When he said build a wall, well, when you've got 21 million illegal immigrants and they're coming over the border and they're being put up under social welfare in some of the democratic states, you can't afford that. Some of the things he was saying were just plain common sense. And maybe that was what confused people because they're so used to duplicitous language.
Well, draining the swamp, I think in his first term, he didn't have a plan to do anything. And it was obvious, right? And the swamp got him, right? The swamp got him. And then he had, like you, he's had a time in the wilderness, and he's got a plan. And this time he's hit the ground running, with Elon Musk and Doge getting big balls in to look through the code and, get right down into the lowest levels of government spending, and then highlighting for the American public, this is what your taxes have been paying for CEOs of woke banks to wear rainbow T-shirts and virtue signal. Right? You came out last week and
It's like,
gave the CEO of Kiwi Bank a
well, what on
serve.
earth are you doing? Worry about your clients' accounts. Worry about the cost of living for them. Worry about the interest rates. Stop wasting our money. We set you up to be a Kiwi bank. You decided just no consultation. You take it to that shape of bank. No, you don't.
Well,
It's our bank. And if you want us to help us going toward making more competitive and take you to 15% of the market, get off your backside and start paying attention to your business. That's what I'm saying. And I've had enough of it because, we go to the wire, we slave out there, go to campaigns, work 7 days a week trying to get into Parliament, and they decide, doesn't matter you're in Parliament, we'll do this for you whether you believe it or not. The answer is, oh, no, you won't. But in the case of Donald Trump, very clear. If that's what you wanted to do, his introduction to his new government, almost by the hours, signing change, has been devastating. If that's what he wanted to do.
Well, he's done more interviews in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
He sits there signing documents, and while he's signing documents, they're asking him questions. Did we ever see Biden do that? Right? Donald Trump answered more questions from the press on the first day in office than Biden did in 4 years.
I can't say anything now, but there'll come a time, in a different time, when I know I haven't got this job, with respect to the press you just asked. I'm sure you know what my answer will be, but I'm not going to answer it now and do a Phil Goff.
Well, I'm glad you raised Phil Goff. You sacked him.
It was the most disappointing thing I had to do because, I'd worked with him. I'd known him for a long time. But when I heard that early in the morning, what he'd said, I thought, this is unbelievable. We are out here waiting for the tariff regime out of the United States. We're fighting for our life as a government in terms of going forward in progress, and a new regime under Donald Trump. And somebody says that. So, yes, I had to do that.
And now he's come out and he's talking smack.
Well, the thing is that now I know I thought it was accidental. I thought it was a university coffee bar moment that he'd had in a later life. Now I'm told it's premeditated. I feel a bit better.
Don't feel so guilty.
I don't feel guilty, but you don't like doing that. When somebody's doing a good job, he makes that feel foul up over there. What did he think? He said, well, to do less is he's enduring his cowardice. No, you're not. You're the ambassador, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs is trying to run everything on the basis of what's diplomatically sound for our country. You don't get a free-thinking moment. You can have it after you leave, but not when you're there.
And as foreign minister, you're having to deal with all sorts of calls around these conflicts that are happening overseas. You've got Israel versus Hamas. You've got the Ukraine, and all these other things happening out there, and people are always looking for comment on you. I keep thinking about the Israel-Hamas situation. Most New Zealanders don't know that our embassy to Israel is in Ankara, Turkey. Do you think there'll come a time where our embassy to Israel is actually where the US embassy is in Jerusalem, or even marginally better, Tel Aviv?
It's probably by to answer. The trouble if I answered that question, they'd all say Winston Peters wants the embassy moved right tomorrow. In a long, changed, different world, we could contemplate that question. The fact is, the 7th of October terrorism is utterly unforgivable. But the loss of life now is unforgivable as well. We need to have the peace sorted out. I was talking just a week ago to the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority. I mean, he gets what the problem is, and yet you got these people protesting outside my place, wearing these hijabs around Parliament, all sorts of darn things, posing as though they know what's going on. They've never talked to the Egyptians. They've never talked to the Gulf states. They've never talked to the
Jordan,
Prime Minister or President of Indonesia. Never talked to anybody. And they're banging on, and they got this stupid media giving them coverage. I'm looking at the media and saying, excuse me, I spoke to that Palestinian Authority just this morning. That shocked him when I said that. And he thanks New Zealand for all their efforts. He does.
there seems to still be in Western countries a belief that a two-party state solution is possible. After October 7, I'm not so sure that's possible anymore. But it leaves a massive question as to how is the West going to pivot on this? Because if Israel falls, the West falls.
Look, I'm not qualified to answer that last question. The reality is, on the first question, we have for decades across the whole political divide in New Zealand supported a two-party state. Unfortunately, when Trump's mentioned how to rebuild the state and said something rather sensible like, well, we won't be able to rebuild it while they're still there, everybody imploded on him.
Yeah.
See, common sense has gone out the window.
But that's another example of Trump saying something, the media and everybody reacting. But like literally 3 days later, Egypt said, well, we'll take 500,000. And Jordan said, we'll take 500,000. And Syria said, we'll take 500,000.
Well, they're more predictable. They got it. It's like us, we're trying to fix up Christchurch and leaving the people in the damaged buildings. He just said something so obvious. So it's very difficult to answer those questions. And at the moment, I do think, though, that we're not very far away. How should I put it? It'll become a time very soon. Then we won't be able, so we'll be able to give you confidence there's going to be peace. It's not there right now because they've still got those hostages.
Well, that's the thing. Every time somebody on X says something to me about, because they know I support Israel, and they say, oh, yeah, when's Israel going to stop the genocide? I always just say back to them, well, have you thought about handing the hostages back?
Well, it's colossal.
Yeah.
Why won't they hand it back?
Well, it's against the Geneva Convention.
Why won't they hand it back on day one?
See, what people don't understand about what happened on October 7 is the government of a part of the so-called Palestinian state of the Gaza Strip, the government, Hamas, they were elected by the people, 75%. They haven't had any elections since, though, of course, like all despots do. They attacked a sovereign nation.
Hang on, to be fair, it'd be rather hard to organise an election there right now. Come on.
Not right now, but you take Mahmoud Abbas, right? He's in his 22nd year of his 4-year term.
Yes.
We're not dealing with people that respect democracy here. But on October 7, Hamas invaded a sovereign nation. And that sovereign nation went through the formal process of declaring war. And people seem to have missed that point because that puts in place the legal framework of how things are to be conducted until peace is settled.
Look, you make out the case. All I'm saying is we are wanting the war over now and a long-term peaceful solution. Now, if you say there's no long-term peaceful solution, well, you're going straight to the book of Revelations, aren't you?
No, I'm following Golda Meir's example. She said that there'll be peace when the Palestinians love their children as much as we love ours.
Nice.
And I thought that was a very profound statement from Golda Meir.
Yeah. Well, it's just been, how shall I say it? You've got these terrorists supported by proxy bankers. We know who they are. And they were hitherto getting away with it. I kind of think that the chance of peace is more close now. I didn't think it's going to happen half a year ago. I think it's more close now, and I just hope so. I've got no greater vision, idea, thinking than that.
So if you look at Switzerland, right, surrounded on all sides by the French. To be fair, the French are no threat really. They like marching backwards more than they like marching forwards. But
I want to go to Paris if I just been in an interview where you said that about the French.
I said it, not you.
And about Napoleon?
And the Germans.
Napoleon was outnumbered so many times and still won.
See, that's one of the that's one of the two rules of French warfare, right? The French only win when they're not led by a Frenchman, and Napoleon was a Corsican, and Joan of Arc was a woman.
Well, the island of Corsica belonged to France, didn't it?
You get the point.
But
Switzerland is neutral.
And also, dare I say it, where did Alexander the Great come from? He came from Macedonia. He didn't come to Greece.
No, that's right.
See? Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, my point is this. Switzerland is neutral. Do they have an army? You betcha they've got an army. You betcha they've got an air force. and every citizen goes through compulsory military training, and every household has an assault rifle and 100 rounds of ammunition in it. And you know what they don't have? They don't have gun crime. It's funny that,
It's busy.
right? But they've also got peace. Now, they had to fight for their peace. They had to throw off the shackles of the Habsburg Empire to do it, and they fought like hell. And various countries around the world saw how they fought like hell. And
but also one other thing you've forgotten. You say they've got guns, all these guns, and no gun problems. That's because in cold climates, people think more with greater clarity. You make a mistake in a cold climate, you're going to die. So you think ahead, you plan ahead, you get the one-on-ones right. You're down the road in your car and you're 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers out and it breaks down. You better have plan B. In our society, because of the welfare state, too many people don't have a plan B. It's always sucks on the plan on state A or the state in plan A. So we got to learn from the cold climates. That's why, again, I wanted to set up an embassy in Scandinavia to see how a small population like ours is doing so much better than ours.
have we become soft?
Yeah, we have been. It was all all predictable. How shall I say it? The bad luck when Adam gave the tomato to Eve, when Eve gave the tomato to Adam and he ate it, was that we had to start a thing called WRK. We had to work. It's never changed since then. But look, I've got to start thinking about going. Do you mind?
All right, I've got a couple more questions for you, right? You've come out opposing the Ministry of Health and their fluoride decisions and things like that. Is that a clear hint that you're saying that you think that some decisions should be devolved to the local community to make their own mind up about what they want to
look for? Decades and decades, the local people got to have a say in an election time referendum or local government elections. So it would cost no more. They got a chance to say whether they wanted fluoride or not. This is not about fluoride or not fluoride. It's the right for the people to have their say. Only one party's making a stand on that. And when they said, it's going to cost you $200,000 for every councillor that offends, every councillor that offends will be guilty of paying $200,000 or imprisonment. This is a thumping, fascist, Nazi, Soviet Union type of approach to government. And we are saying, give the people their vote back. Let them decide whether it's good or bad. Why do you journalists or why do you members of parliament think that you've got the best and only right to have a say? We all believed that until 2021. But the Labour Party picked up a National Party bill and put it through. We weren't there. We're back there now. I'm going to campaign on it. Not on fluoride or anti-fluoride, but on the people's right to have a vote.
which kind of brings me to a little bit of a duplex question here. We've seen the Treaty Principles Bill Furore come out, and I know your position on that. There are no principles in the treaty, and we don't need to have a bill that will create an act of parliament that will then create principles that later on can be amended.
Precisely.
Right. But can you see that now that that has effectively collapsed, that it's over, that you'll see some people out there put a citizens-initiated referendum together to ask what precisely that question, right? If we are going to have principles, what should those principles be?
Yeah. Well, they can do all that, but I'll tell you what, I'll be campaigning flat out in the same way. It was set out by a man 103 years ago, got a law degree in a record time in this country, in 2 years flat.
Faster than you even.
No, faster than everybody. He was a brilliant man. He went on to be in Parliament for 37 or something years. He was a brilliant Maori leader called Abraham Mangata. In 1922, he wrote exactly about the Treaty of Waitangi. And now we got these sort of people coming along in a later time saying, oh, but, even though we are so further away from the leadership that signed the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, they somehow know better. It's a convenient industry for certain people in the semi-quasi-judiciary, and it's a massive industry for the education industry. And now they're talking this stuff, they're preaching this stuff. You've got Auckland Law School's got a tikanga course. This is total bull dust. You know what tikanga is? It's the protocol on my marae. If I go to the next marae, it's so different. If I go to another marae on my in my own iwi, it can be different. So there can be 62 minimum and probably 95 different tikanga or much more, and they're preaching tikanga at law school. My answer challenge to that law school administration is, do you know anything about tikanga for a start? And also, it's becoming under you whatever you want it to be. That's not academia. Let them learn that about their future anthropological studies that they like. But it's got nothing to do with our law. And we're going to cut your water off. If you think you're going to go on teaching that sort of drab stuff and radical stuff at the enormous cost of the academic achievements, then we've got an answer for you. You find the money somewhere else.
That's a fair point. You're doing it with the government's money.
Yeah.
But that's what we're seeing with the health lobbyists, isn't it? They're getting paid by the government and then coming out and attacking government policy.
Yeah, that's right.
Their own minister even, they're attacking them. Leaking to media and stuff like that.
Well, you got to ask the politicians, how come you got yourself in a circumstance where you're financing your enemies?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Pull the funding.
Yeah.
The Maori ward referenda. How do you think that's going to go?
It's shameful. The reality is that referendum is going to go fine because people will have a choice. But let me tell you something. I object to these radicals and people making all these demands because they've never done down the hard road of the journey. I'm the fourth guy to make it since 1854 in a general seat, what I used to call a European seat. And then we changed MMP and it's been a dramatic change. The Maori numbers are far greater in Parliament than the numbers out in the population. That's the truth. Or if it's not, then you're saying some people with one part in 32, or one part in 64, or one part in 512 are actually Maori. This is a fiction. So we're doing far better than we ever have. And also, my brother was head of the Northern Regional Council. They have a on the Northern Regional Council. Then we get there because of the Maori way. We've had three mayors of Dunedin, all with an Asian background. You had Meng Foon, Chinese background in Gisborne, spoke fluent Maori. You got a Maori mayor in Rotorua. When are these people going to actually get off their butt and start competing properly and evenly instead of relying upon privilege? It's like somebody in the All Blacks saying, don't tackle me too hard because I'm a Maori. It's disgusting.
That's what we see from the Labour Party, this doctrinaire mollycoddling of Maori with no respect at all for their abilities. Like I sit across the table for you and I see a respected politician who's done years and years. You happen to be Maori, but that's of no consequence to the discussion that we're having.
Well, I'm lucky I happen to be Maori and half Maori and half Scottish. And it's not amusing things about that. He used to say, like Billy T. James used to say, one half he wants to get drunk, the other half doesn't want to pay for it. Well, he couldn't possibly say that now, but he did more for racial relations with that sort of humour. Well, it gives you a natural suntan and a desire to save money. But whatever it is, we've got to make the most of what we are and don't disown the other part of our background. To disown the other part of my background is to disown a mother with a Scottish background who had 11 children. And today, only one of them has died. And he wouldn't be dead if he had taken Hob advice and got attention. And so to bring up mum and dad, 11 children, and only have mum and dad have died. One at 97, the other one at 85. And he was too stubborn to go to hospital as well. That's my dad. And no one else in 5 generations is a miracle family. See what I mean? Instead of being grateful for that, I've got fair to go out and find something to whinge about. We've known more than poverty smells and tastes and feels like than nearly most families in this country.
Well, because
I can prove it.
When you went to school, of course, you had the school lunch program back then, didn't you?
Well, the school lunch program was we had to peel the potatoes and the senior girls made the stew and we had to dish it out.
Yeah.
And did it all for free. So that's what it was.
Exactly. I mean, your mum made do. You learnt to make do.
Oh, well, yes.
Now we've got a whole bunch of parents.
I look across that parliament and I think to myself, you know nothing about poverty. I've seen it. I've lived through it. I'm not, how should I say it? I'm not unproud of it because the best thing ever happened to us.
Yeah. I've got a mate who's a multimillionaire and he said he's a multimillionaire because he was poor when he was a kid.
That's right.
And he taught me a thing about eating fish and chips too. Like we occasionally, once a month, sit down and have fish and chips, a whole group of us, and he brings this big thing in, and he says you can tell somebody's upbringing by how they eat fish and chips. If they were brought up poor, right, there's always a piece of fish for everybody, so they eat that last. They eat the chips first, because if you eat your fish first, you're not going to get any chips.
Yes. Well, my way of eating fish and chips is I hate beer batter for a start. I love the Japanese batter because it's much lighter and it's not fattening. And I'm very, very sparing on the chips. There's the trouble with diet. Everything that you love, you can't eat.
Yeah, except, hang on a second, you are known as a bit of a guts when it comes to food, but it's all raw food, isn't it? It's venison and
yeah. Well,
those sorts of things.
Well, venison's tremendous. I love that, and I love the right greens.
Because you've made a thing about the diet. You had a health scare at one point and decided to change your diet.
No. It was not. It was. I keep on telling people it was 5th of June, 1980, and we've been in Parliament for a while. A new intake. We all looked around and we used to wear, those waistcoats in those days. And they're all like that. All the buttons are bursting. And I thought, there's something wrong with us. We're all getting seriously overweight. We're sitting here and I'm just thinking about it. I'll go on a diet. And I looked around and the Japanese diet, you got the Mediterranean diet, but many high protein, low carbohydrate, lots of greens and lots of fish, as much as fish as you can like. So learn how to cook fish properly.
Well, you got to catch it first, though.
Guess what I had for breakfast this morning?
Fish.
No. I had a lovely pole flounder. I just salted the aluminium foil on the bottom, laid the flounder out, salted the top of the flounder as well, folded in, put it in the oven, 180, quarter of an hour. Magnificent. All the juices in it. Unbelievable. Perfect.
Maybe we should do a cooking with Winston show. How to cook venison ribs on a barbecue.
I got those ways as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming to the first podcast. We'll have David Fisher will be able to write an article about that, and of course he'll have to sit here and listen to the words
this
of
is
wisdom.
The Northern by-election in 2015. He stops you on the side of the road in Darwin and says, the Prime Minister says you're not well. He said to me, and I said, you put that in the Herald, I'll be suing you first. The Herald said, no, John, you're second defendant. That's just defamatory.
That's what David Fisher does. I mean, the amount of stories he's written about me looks like he's got an obsession.
Well, I did believe that he was once a very talented journalist. I don't know these days, but I did say to him, and you mean to say you're going to put this in the paper, smack in the middle of a 27-day campaign for the Northern by-election? That's life,
Well, he lives up in Kerikeri now. He doesn't even live in Auckland anymore, works for the Herald. There's only so many cats get stuck up a tree in Northland, isn't there? But
there's some very attractive places to live up in Northland.
Oh, absolutely.
And the great thing nowadays, when you've got communication connection, you can live anywhere if you're good enough.
Oh, that's right. And
one job you can't do that in, and it's called politics.
No, you can't get away from that.
No, you can't.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. And this is, as I said, the first Good Oil podcast, and I can't think of a better politician to have that first podcast with.
Well, you can say the next politician comes in when you finish off. Thank you very much.
You're not as good as Winston.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay.